should have been a third. This the information note, so maybe we can just mention that so that I don't forget it. So we just addressed the meeting with the county council on May 31st.
Yeah, just a bit of an update. We do have a time set with county council, or at least a date set with county council to make a presentation, just to give them an update on what's happening in the board. Pino and Meredith and I think will be attending. And this is sort of, and Kristen, sorry. And this is sort of a typical thing that we would have tried to do, but of course with COVID, we haven't done it for 3 years. And it's really just an opportunity to connect in with our municipal counterparts and let them know what's happening in our board. And I know we'll be talking about secondary school review probably mainly, but there may be other things. And we will be setting up a meeting as well with the Pembroke Council, Town Council or City Council, because they are not part of County Council. So we always go to see them as well. So that's the update on that, and we'll give you the scoop once we've seen them. It's usually a very good connection. There are always lots of questions. At least there have been in the past. So see how that goes.
Thank you. Any questions on that? No. All right. So the highlight of the afternoon, the draft budget. I'll hand it over to Jennifer.
Thanks. Thanks, Leo. Yes, as you know, the GSNs were released April 17th, a little bit different than February 17th last year. And so, and I know everything sounds wonderful in the headlines. Sometimes things change names, sometimes things get moved from PPFs to GSNs. And so it really takes Tammy and her team quite a lot of time and effort to really delve into all of the details just to see what the impact will be to us. And so we just have we like to bring it to you in segments. And so what we have today is a little bit of enrollment and the revenue side. Join the meeting so that they can see me. Oh, we don't have the microphone following around today?
No.
There were problems with it.
The owl hasn't.
The owl.
All right. All good. Okay. Good. So I'll walk through the timelines a little bit. So in March, early March, we received projected enrollments from the schools based on actual registrations and course choosing from the students. So we work with HR to determine staffing levels for next school year, mostly for the teacher groups to determine based on class sizes and needs, depending program and everything. Then we start working on the salary projections with that information. April, we continue to work on our staffing and salary budgets. And when we get the grants, which is different every year, we start analyzing them once the software is ready for us to use, because just the memos it makes it hard just to get a feel for everything. So we luckily got everything at once this year, so we were able to start analyzing right away. In May, which we're in, you'll get your GSN projection, which we're going to talk about. Then I'll start working on the estimate of other revenues, start working on updating department budgets, including utilities and transportation, refining the salary budgets based on decisions that get made throughout the month. And then in June, bringing a projection, hopefully to board in early June, to present the final budget for approval before the end of the year. So there's just a list of the memos that I'm sure you've had a chance to look at by now. So one of the changes was the announcement of the new formula for transportation. They are providing the boards with a transition amount so that to be expected to stay over the next 4 years. But they haven't said if they're going to reduce that transition amount. There's still some details that aren't known, and transportation's working on what that means to our board. You will see an increase in the grant of 546,000 because they have increased the fuel rate benchmark from 0.936 to 1.5. And
which will then go basically to operators. So it's an increase in the grant. And when we do the budget side, you'll see that. At the expense side, you'll see that as well.
Just a question with that. So that's just for fuel, so that'll go just more or less a flow through then?
Yeah, so right now, the benchmark was set at that, and if the benchmark throughout the year changed, they adjust that at the end of the year, up or down. And we'd have to do a payout either twice a year or once a year, or claw back if it goes down, which it did once during COVID. To the operators. So they've just adjusted this benchmark that the operators get. So that'll basically just go to the operators, and then if it goes up above or below the 1.5, then they'll adjust it at the end of the school year. They gave us money for remote learning administration to support remote learning. The administration piece of that. When we did the estimates of the enrollment, we had about 25 that were interested. I'm not sure if that number has changed or not. So this amounted to about $12,000 in this grant. And the boards have a choice on how they're going to deliver that remote learning instruction, whether they do it themselves or work with another board to do it. There was a new Safe Clean Schools supplement that was added of 186,000 that can be used to support student well-being and maintain clean schools. So it can be used for professionals, paraprofessionals, educational assistants, or custodial maintenance. So that's.
We figured out what we're gonna do with it. We broke it down.
Not quite yet. No, we have to look at the big picture to see the impacts of, so the analysis is done sort of in small bunches or batches, and then we have to pull it all together to see what the impact is on everything before we can determine where and what we'll do. So that's going to continue on through May.
So this kind of like replace some of the COVID's cleaning money.
No COVID, the 1.7 million COVID funding is gone.
But this kind of replaced it. Yeah, a
Right.
little piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite a range of options, but yes. It's kind of-
Yeah.
And so this would be sort of prorated depending on the size of the board. Like if they're at the province, like I'm just assuming like ours is 186 and change. I'm assuming the bigger boards get more. I'm just saying it's a percentage or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, as we just said, the COVID Learning Fund, as they told us last year, is gone. That was 1.7 million for us. The labor-related
Just
changes.
back to that, how will that affect us this year? Like, is it a major impact?
Well, everything that we put in place for that money was temporary in nature. It was, the supports, whether it was, I think, $800,000 for the custodians, because we really had to change. Oh, that was the year before? Oh, right.
This had to be, this was all like, there was EAs,
Oh.
some reading specialists.
Oh.
Diversity. Those types of.
Yeah, and the intention was temporary, and they were very clear about that. So, but that would have been sort of add on to our regular. Practice.
Yeah. So the labor rate changes that they've added into the benchmarks of all of the grants. They've added in $1 per hour for all of the education workers, so the QPs that ratified, but also the other education workers. So like our ESPs and all those different groups that are considered education workers, that's been worked into the grant that funds them. The 1.25% increase has been added to the salary benchmarks for teachers, basically. For both years, and when last year they gave us a 1% for last school year. So when we look at the change in the grants, we'll see the 1.25% for this year, plus that extra 0.25. So when we're looking at the change in grants, that's what we see, but that's what and it's a provision they're saying, so we have to budget for it because that's how they are funding us at this current time.
It's
Just a question. So I'm assuming, they haven't ratified a contract yet. So once that's been settled, we would get additional dollars if they get additional more than 1.25%, which is possible, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so they realigned the Indigenous education funding. So the FNMI studies allocation, which funds the sections that are secondary schools, those sections used to generate the funding. We were previously funded at $1,221 per pupil. Starting in 21-22, they enveloped that part of the Indigenous grant, that anything that wasn't spent directly on those sections had to be moved into the board action plan to be spent on Indigenous education within that board action plan. So last year we had $1.4 million of this for this grant. Of that, about 377,000 was transferred to the board action plan. So history of the way it is this year. For next year, the funding has been reduced to $645 per student in these classes when the class isn't fully funded by the Pupil Foundation grant. So the average class size secondary is 23 students per course. So they're saying if it's under 23, they will give us some money to top up per class, per school. So if a school said they had 15 in one semester and 15 in the other, the ministry doesn't care. They'll take a look over the whole year based on the calculations I've kind of come up with to match what they're doing. They'll say there's 30 over the full year. You're fully funded from the Pupil Foundation grant. You get no money. So that's why we've dropped to $60,000 from 1.4 million. So they're basing that number on the 21-22 school year actuals for now, because that's numbers they have, and kind of to show us how it's done. And then they'll pull it from our ONSIS reports every year to calculate that number go forward.
So the 645, that's in addition to just a regular GSN for like per student?
It's only, as it only amounts to $60,000 in total. Yes, it's on top, but it's only if you're running small classes, which most of our Indigenous studies classes are, regular size. Yeah. So the ministry is providing one-time realignment mitigation fund to partially mitigate these impacts, of which amounted for us is $352,000. They also told us that we could use some of the new supplemental amount that they're giving us, which is on the next slide, that could be used to offset some committed costs that have already happened for next year, which has happened to us because we thought they already made the changes they were going to make to this grant when they enveloped it. And so we allowed some sections to be given out already.
And Mike has a question.
Yeah. I'm really concerned about the way the government's going about this. I mean, I'm not an accountant, but I'm looking at, they've poured a lot of money into this important file, this Indigenous file. And I think that for whatever reasons, they're now looking at, okay, things are up and running. And now we're looking at retracting some of that monies. I think it's pretty substantial. It's really bothersome to me because when we start taking monies from elsewhere, it's from elsewhere. I mean, it's really concerning to me. And I really think that I'm only one of many trustees, but I really think that we need to have a pretty fulsome debate about this. Because if they're not giving us the money, I mean, it really bothers me. I just want to say that for the record. It doesn't sit well with me at all. And we can discuss that at a later date. But, it's a very important file. It's a file that's been neglected for whatever reason for years. And I think that until we got this news, I think all things being said, we're reasonably funded on this file. But for whatever reason, they're retracting significant monies and they expect us somehow to be creative and make those monies up. And that's really disturbing to me. And I won't go on any longer about it, but when I read this sounds like, I mean, it's probably across the whole province and everybody's probably saying the same thing. So it's very disturbing to me because I do know some of the people involved in our board that are on this file, and they're exceptional employees. They're doing a great job. But money talks. And when you don't get it, and things have to be readjusted, I'm really concerned about this file.
Yeah.
Because when you hire staff and you assume you're going to be going down this road and you get much less money, there's going to be a lot of boards that are going to be saying different words similar to what I'm saying. So I won't get into it anymore, but that's, to me, out of everything I read, this jumps out at me with a big red flag.
So,
Yeah.
so we're basically down $1 million on this. Is that?
Yeah, and where it's affecting the most is it's affecting what we allocate to secondary teachers, right? And it helps us with offering extra programs in the schools. Because like they say, we're funded for those classes through the People Foundation grant, because we're offering art class and English class and those types of things that are normally funded through the People Foundation grant. So they've taken that away and say, no, you're already funded. Because we're a small board, it's really helped us offer more programs. So they've created this new supplemental amount that's on the next page. That's going to stay in the board action plan. So it's making up for that difference that was being transferred, that 377,000 that we were transferring.
Right.
This year, we're getting it back in the pupil fund, in the new supplemental amount. We're going to use some of it this year to help us balance off the secondary teacher problem. And we're going to have a problem next year of how we're going to offer program without that money. But the programming that the Tina does with the grad coaches and the different things, we're still going to have those funds to run that part of the programming. Yeah.
It's
go ahead.
the FTE.
Yeah.
And because that's a good point, Mike. Nobody's across the province saw this coming. I think province wide, it's about $77 million that this grant has been reduced by. So it's significant. And we were very confident that we didn't anticipate any changes. So we handed out those sections because it had to do with staffing, and we're not the only board, which is why they provided the mitigating funds and said, well, this year only you can make use of your supplementary, because they recognized that they made the announcement after staffing. So as Tammy said, we're okay for this year, but we're really going to have to put our thinking caps on, as you know, as early as November, December, January, to think as a district, how are we going to serve our students at the secondary panel with this impact.
So it's not affecting like Tina's
No.
a little section like with her grad coaches and stuff, but
We still have enough
So-
funding for that.
no funding for that.
In the short term, pardon me.
No, and then,
No,
well, as it's written right now,
Yeah.
as it's written right now, those supports that money allows us to put into place for the students that meet the criteria that they need to meet, that continues. So they're just moving it from over here to over here, and really just kind of insisting that good work continue, and saying, well, you'll have to find a new way to get, sections into your secondary schools. And we're certainly not alone. So we will be leaning on other boards as well, and to try and come up with some solutions.
So they're kind of saying if you're gonna have 30 students, you need to have them in that one class rather than split it over two.
You can't use you can use a little bit, well, 60,000 isn't even a teacher.
Right.
So, yeah, a couple sections
Mhm.
each semester kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, yeah, with the new supplemental amount of the 645,000 that was added, that will help run all that other stuff. So this year we'll use some of that to help balance off the sections that we already gave out, but there'll still be some left over. Plus, because that was enveloped funding, we have some carry forward from the last couple of years, from the current year and prior year possibly, to help offset that we use some of this funds this year, that they'll still be able to go ahead with what they're planning to do next year. So that will be good. They did say that with the 645,000 that there are still going to be some engagement with Indigenous stakeholders and school boards in the spring to determine priorities of this new amount.
Sure.
Yeah, I really see that, unless there's some changes made, I can see secondary really being very challenging. But that aside, I think that the public relations side of it moving forward, if we're starting to have a difficult time with the same number of sections or cutting or whatever we have to do from a public relations point of view, we really need to put the spotlight right where it belongs. It's not with us. It's not with us at all. I mean, that's as bluntly as I can say it. So Because I do think that this file is really important and it's really started to grow and take off and we've done great things. But without the continued monies, it's one thing about being creative, but it's another thing about being, if it's taken away from something else as a trustee, it's concerning to me. Anyway, I think we're going to have some discussions moving forward. Thank you.
And if I could just add to that, certainly the Indigenous Trustees Council as part of OPSPA is really rallying forward, and they actually were having a meeting with the minister. I think the beginning of last week around this, because they realized that across the province, there are huge impacts. So there's a lot of pushback. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and as usual, they transferred some PPFs into the GSNs. So this year they transferred the specialist high skills major expansion funds that we got last year of 247,000. So Shazam has always been in the GSNs or has been for multiple years. This was just the expansion portion of it. So they've moved that in and it's a table amount. And I have confirmed that it's 247,000 again this year. Early math intervention for students with special needs has been moved from the PPFs into the GSNs of 109,000. And as the title says, it's been moved into the special education grant. And the demographic data gathering has been moved in as well of 32,000. School, they keep them up the costs, as they always say. School operations allocation, they've added 2% cost update to assist with commodity prices. No, the additional part shouldn't be there.
So there wasn't an additional.
Last year there was additional, this year there was not.
Wishful thinking.
And they've only added this 2% only to the facilities area, the plant operations. They haven't added any increases for costs for inflation to anything else other than salaries. So that's what they've added in there.
So that's restricted even more. So
Well,
it's not even up to inflation.
no, it's just 2%, and which is what they normally do is 2% a year, but yeah, so.
Very low
that's-
number.
It is a very low number. And it only amounts to about 112,000 for the facilities line.
Yeah.
That's non-staff.
When you think of the work that Bill and his team are doing to reduce our usage, really helps us. And, we're fortunate that way that, because the 112 really is,
Yeah.
doesn't go far.
Yeah. So our special incident portion, or they call it SIP funding. They've given us an interim approach because they're reviewing that grant portion of the grant as well. So for 23-24, the SIP funding, they told us would be higher of last year and the current year, plus a growth rate. So in 21-22, we were given $1,094,000. And in 22-23, we've been told we were getting 1.5 million, which with the 5% increase gives us a grant of 1.6 million, which, yeah.
Which reinforces when we hear folks in the schools talking about increased student population with increased student needs, and this is an application-based funding. So it just, to me, it speaks volumes that, in 1 year with that, and an increase that size just reinforces what we're hearing in the schools.
I may, I've just heard from a number of other boards that their SIP funding was cut this year.
Well, we heard that too. We did.
So I'm surprised that ours was
So,
increased.
we were reduced, and Jenny and her team, put in an awful, redid, and we had meetings and we have reconfirmed, we from provincial and from regional, we have it in writing, that we were readjusted back to where we were. So yes, there was a little ripple effect, but not all boards, just some boards. I think they were all in sort of the eastern northern region. And I feel like those boards should have also have received the same news we did.
Probably did then. Okay, that's great news. Good, thank you.
We heard the same through you. I just want to make a comment sitting on SEAC. Brian would agree. I know that the tremendous amount of work that Jenny and her team do, I think that's why it's increased. And I've been around long enough that the hours and hours that go into preparing for people to room over that so that we do get an increase. is astronomical. So Jenny, thank you, and pass on to your team,
I will
Ryan and I.
Yes.
I know
Yes.
that it's like reams of research and paperwork. It's just mounds.
Wait, here.
Mounds. Thank you.
Welcome.
Just clarify, so what does the SIP actually cover?
Oh,
So just another cover.
mostly EAs, right? Because it covers when the student needs more than one EA. So that, I think that's, yeah.
I think it's for the neediest of the neediest.
That's right, that's right.
And I think that under special circumstances, I mean, some of these kids' files are like their books.
Yeah.
And unless the funding is almost perfect, just like many boards, we could have had a significant decrease in funding had we not had a crackerjack team looking at this. And those are my words, and Brian would concur. So thank you.
We'll look forward to the review process because there are some pieces which, just cause us pause that depending on how we qualify for funding, that certain arrangements would qualify for funding over others. So such as students in a small class versus students in a very inclusive environment, who are needing the support to be in that inclusive environment. So there are lots of questions around this. So I'm happy that they're reviewing and look forward to what that process will look like in the future.
I think the other thing, just to note, Leo, too, is it's, there's the piece around the EAs, but also ensuring safety and health. If there's like major health concerns with the student that they need support for, it helps to support that too.
Just building on that comments of my colleagues, there was once a point in time where the EA support was strictly educational in nature, but what's really grown and trend is the pieces that Jacqueline just mentioned around safety as well as medical pieces. So that the demands on educational assistance are very varied. It's well beyond the learning piece, and sometimes is, directly related to the safety of that individual student or other students in the classroom. So it's a very challenging portfolio piece. So appreciate the comments from our trustees.
So the differentiated funding for online learning. So this is the third year of the implementation, which reflects the change of the number of online credits that a secondary student is required to take in the 4 years. So this adjustment assumes 22.5% of secondary students will take one course online. And it's up from 15% the prior year, which is just the increase. So it's almost fully implemented. By next year it will be. Enhanced accountability measures. So they've given us some money for external audit capacity. They haven't given us a whole lot of details other than it's for enrollment audits and full-time equivalent compliance audits. For accountability to the benefit trust allocation. So one of the reports that we fill out every year at the end of the year is a breakdown of all of our FTE by line, so teachers and paraprofessionals and all those different things by union across. Well, I'm doing this because it's a great big huge spreadsheet that we fill out. And it's hard to get it right every time because you miss a line and everything else, but it affects the funding that goes to the trusts. So the trusts want that audited. The minister reviews it every year. So they come back with questions to me every year and say, why did this go up or why did this go down? And so this way they'll have the auditors do this for us. Maybe not every year, maybe every 3 years, kind of do a review of it for them. And then just give it a better reliance on those numbers, is my understanding of that piece. So the priorities and partnerships funds, or the PPFs, the provincial funding in the memo totaled 516 million. Last year was only 288 million in the same sentence, and 372,000 of that has been allocated to the boards. So some still hasn't been decided how it will be allocated yet, or might be an application process. So this screen, it's actually 2 screens long, but I thought I'd compare to last year to show these are the ones that we got last year in the memo, and where we're at this year with the same ones. So most of them are about the same. The early intervention math moved into the GSMs. As you can see, The math strategy, we had 288,000 previously. It has been moved into some other math grants that are on the next page. And the tutoring supports at the bottom of 776,000 was one-time funding that ends this year. So it was just to get caught up. So last year's total was 1.5 million almost. So this screen is all the newer ones that have been added. So there's some reading ones, quite a few. Then the math ones, so midway, there's the math lead, digital math tools, and school math facilitators, as well as professional assessments, the de-streaming, and transition to high school. So that's combined, and then the summer mental health. So a total of almost $2.1 million this year.
For the summer mental health, so that's new this year.
No, we've been getting it. It just wasn't announced in the B memo in past years, but we have been getting that for a couple summers, I believe.
How's that access then?
We're still waiting on, and over the next week or two, they're supposed to send us more of a description on how it can be spent. Right now, we have just a little paragraph which says to continue mental health supports over the summer. So right now, the only thing that we've actioned is that we're setting up our agreement with the Phoenix Center so that our students can access the counseling service of the Phoenix Center workers over the summer. So we set up an agreement with them so they'll take on, and we'll do a handover of some of our students who we know are going to require that support over the month of June so that they'll have support during the summer. So we're working on that agreement right now. That only uses a chunk of that funding. So we're really waiting on the little paragraph that's going to tell us a little bit more about how we're able to spend it.
Sometimes they allow you to spend it into September too. So yeah, so it says summer, sometimes it's right to the end of September with transition sections. Yes. Yeah.
So just before that, just because you mentioned the Phoenix Center, I just want to let everybody know, I'm sure I mentioned it before, but just I also sit on that board.
Okay.
Okay, so just so you're aware. All right, so Susan?
So I guess I'm just looking at the previous slide where you've got total for 2023 of 1.45 million, is that right? So this actually has gone up from 1.45 to 2.1 basically.
Yeah, and it's the transition one for the high transition and de-streaming amount would be a big chunk of that. And then the reading interventions would be the other big chunk. The math we kind of had some of that before, but now it's.
Athlete is new though, is it?
The athlete is new. And then the school math facilitators is a little new.
Okay.
They're saying how it needs to be spent a little differently than the current math one that we have.
Mike, yes?
Just one quick question, on the first one, health resources. I just put a question mark, define, like it's up $2,100. $2,100. What exactly is that?
Oh, that depends each year on, 1 year it was cannabis training for principals. Sex trafficking was, yeah, so it depends on what they
Okay.
want
Okay,
to
thanks.
focus.
Just didn't know what it was.
Okay, so we'll get into the actual grant calculations. So as you know, it's based mostly on enrollment. And the slides you have, I apologize, I didn't catch my mistakes. They're updated on the screen and I can send you a copy of the updated slide. Some of the numbers didn't add properly. So total elementary, we're going up 173 from last year's estimates to this year's estimates, to a total of 6,248 students. And secondary, we're going up about 56 from 2,848 to 2,904. Total for the board, we're going up 229 from estimates to estimates, 2.6%. And I say from estimates to estimates because on the next couple slides, you'll see that we actually went up mostly in year. So when we look at the elementary for current year estimates was 6,075. When I filed revised estimates in the fall, we were at 6,287. So we increased 212 in the current year. And we're projecting pretty much going down 39 for revised estimate or for the estimates for next year. However, JK enrollment is still not, nailed down because we use it go based on actual registrations we get many registrations that come in over the summer. I budget for some extra, but in the last few years, I've been budgeting a little low. So we'll see what this summer brings. And then we may see actual slight increase once we get September numbers. For secondary, we actually had a small decrease from estimates to revised in the current year. So it actually is an increase from this year to next year, of about 76. We talked about the realignment of the Indigenous education funding. So overall, when we add up all those numbers, it's a total decrease in the GSMs of 260,000. Again, being the big change in the formula of the FNMI studies allocation. The transfer to the GSNs, we just talked about, the total of that increase to the GSNs is 388,000 when you add those three together. The new funding amounts add up to 288,000 when you add safe and clean schools, the remote learning, and the external audit capacity. The labor related changes, so that $1 per hour plus the 1.25 adds up to 2.1, almost 2.2 million. By the time you add in the ministry share of the benefit trust. So that would be the change in the QP agreement. The ongoing implementation, so the differentiated funding for online learning, third year is 37,000, and that's about what it's been the last 2 years as well. The retirement gratuities. This is the last year you let me talk about this number anyways. 100, so they've reduced all the benefit amounts and all the salary portions of all the different grants. Totals about 111,000, almost 112 reduction in the grants. So we won't see that reduction in the future because the 12 years has gone up. And same with the next one, the school operations supplementary area factor. This is the 5th year of that adjustment. So it's in the facilities grant. Where they changed it, and some boards may have gone up and some boards went down based on the size of their schools and how they determine that factor. So we've been losing money. So we've been 63,000 again this year. So. And the 2% for the school operations line is 112,000. Talked about that. Increasing, so the change in the enrollment from estimates to estimates amounted to $2 million increase to the grants. Biggest portion of that being in the first line of the pupil foundation grant, including the qualification experience grant, which is what we get to get our average teacher salary to. And then, yeah, continuing education is showing down. That's been trending down over the last few years. And again, that's an estimate based on how we've been trending.
That's just based on enrollment.
It's based on average daily enrollment. So if you have one student taking one course, they're 0.25 of an ADE, right? So that's and that's the over 21 students. The under 21 are funded fully through the Pupil Foundation grant. The over 21 are funded at a much smaller rate in the continuing education grant. But it also covers, continuing education grant also covers summer school and stuff like that, but that's not where the decline is.
Yes.
So do we get funding for students who return after grade 12 to take the 5th year?
Yes, to a certain extent.
To a certain level.
If they're over 32 credits and they're not special education students because they're exempted from this, then we only get the continuing education rate for them. They call them high credit students. So that's part of the continuing education grant too, but it's very small for our board. So we might have an average daily enrollment for those students of about 15. So it's more than 15 students that hit that, but we might only get one credit or 2 credits depending, because a lot of the 5th years come back also to finish because they failed some courses and those types of things. So it's after they've gotten 32 past credits, like they've passed the courses, then yeah, we lose funding.
So under 32 credits, so they
Fully
received full funding.
Yeah, as long as they're under 21.
I've been told twice by two different people that we're returning to grade 13 and we'll be fully funded, just so. No.
My kids heard that too.
I don't know where it's coming from, but I haven't heard that anywhere. But I've heard it by rumor.
Yeah, just one thing, the $87,712 in continuing education decrease. I know it's due to numbers, but we've had, like you said, Tammy, in the last couple of years, significant decreases. How much of it's a COVID factor? How much of it's because there's more employment out there? I'm not sure. It's pretty complex. But I think that's something in the future that we'll probably have some pretty fulsome discussions about because although those numbers are real, they're somewhat disturbing to me. I mean, we've got a fairly impoverished area in the valley, and some of these adults don't start coming back to school till their mid-20s or much older. And those numbers, for whatever reason, I would guess to know why. There's people in this room that have more information than I do, but that number is quite concerning to me because it's just not a one-year thing. It's been a few years now. So thank you. We'll probably discuss that when we're doing that review.
Maybe Mr. Chair, just a couple of points to add to Trustee Gannett's comments. We do have a cyclical review, formal review planned for adult and continuing education in the upcoming school year. So we're really looking forward to that, led by Superintendent Kuzno. The other factor is beyond the cyclical reviews that we do time and again for various programs or department areas, we do have the ongoing staffing that happens based on our numbers. And in this particular case, some of the decline that Trustee Gannett is talking about has impacted our current operations of adult and continuing education, which is always a challenge when you know you have a review coming, but it's been the case for us this current school year and the upcoming school year. So it's something that staff is aware of, sensitive to, and we're looking forward to that review for all the points Trustee Gannett made on what we can do in supporting our adult and continuing education learners, as well as program infrastructure in that way. No, it's been a challenge.
If I can just add on to that, I think the challenge with that too is that it's a little bit of you build it, they become too, because if you don't have the staffing to do the work, then you can't provide the programming. And I know there's been discussion about, we probably should be doing, and I know they're doing a pretty good job of advertising, that we probably need to be doing more of that to raise the awareness that, as an adult, you can come back to here and receive your OSSDs. It is a challenging area, no question, but so important for our community. I think, as Mike mentioned, with certainly some lower income areas, it's more difficult than if you've got people who don't have at least that basic education in order for them to get a good position.
So the other grant adjustments, some we've talked about and some not. So the Q&E grant, or the qualification and experience grant for the experience where the teachers are placed on the grid, has actually gone down 565,000, and we see that going down on the expense side as well. So that just means that we've had more some retirements and people new on the grid. So that brings that average down. So sometimes we see that average go up and sometimes we see it go down. So this is the down year. And then we talked about the increase to the SIP amount of the special education grant of 633,000. They've also increased the DSNEA amount. So it's a table amount and it's a big long calculation, but how they come up with it, by 214,000. And I believe part of that increase is due to that the dollar per hour and the 1.25%. So even though we don't have that full calculation, I believe that that's partly for some of that based on looking at all the increases in the staffing that funds. The French grant has increased by 64,000 for the program expansion. So where we see new grades being added in schools, that's where that's calculated from. The fuel benchmark in transportation, that 546,000. The loss of the COVID recovery fund. Capital debt interest is down, but that's every year as we pay off our debt for some major repairs to our schools, as well as And then other benchmarks that they adjust throughout, of 102. So total decrease in all these others of 834,000. When we summarize all of those, we're seeing a total increase to the GSNs of 3.6. With a big chunk of that being the labor related. So a lot of that we'll see when we do the expense side being increases in average in salaries for that labor increase. This is just what it'll kind of look like when we do the budget books. Yep, thank you. The enrollment was right on that page, so the 2% increase at the top. And this is where you'll see how it affects each individual grant. So in the Pupil Foundation grant, we're seeing a $2.1 million increase. Part of that is related to the enrollment and part of that is related to the labor increase. So that's why that's such a big increase. In the Indigenous education, you'll see that, the total drop is 352,000. Again, some of that's enrollment driven and some of that's the change in the grant. Learning opportunities, a couple grants moved in there. The Safe Clean School amount of 186 moved into that one, as well as the 247,000 for Shazam moved into that grant. So that's why you'd see a big jump there. Qualification and experience we just talked about. And transportation was made up of enrollment, which was an in-year change to that. So they froze us at that amount as well as the fuel. Yeah, those are the big changes.
It's number 13, restraint measures.
It didn't change.
That's the restraint.
Sorry. That was something they introduced many years ago, and I believe it has something to do with where they froze some salaries. And it hasn't changed. I don't even know if they talk about it in the technical paper. I'd have to look it up.
All right.
Yeah.
Can I just confirm the heading on that page? On my page, it's got 22, 23 on both headings. I'm assuming one should be 23, 24, right? The first one should be 23, 24. I just want to make sure about the rest.
Yes, sorry.
That's
Yes,
fine. No worry.
yeah. The first column is the current year, or is next year, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. So, school operation grant, the 511 again is the enrollment. The changes to that grant for the final year of 63,000, as well as the 2%. So you'll see, and the labor increases. So this shows the 3.6%, 3.6 million increase in a different way. So for the June 13th meeting, my plan is to have the salary and benefit changes, the miscellaneous revenues, any other expense changes, as well as the envelopes and the capital budget. And with the goal of trying to have it ready for the 19th to pass the final. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I have in my mind. So then the GSNs, it increased by 3.6 million, right?
Correct.
But that there are other things that got removed. So in the end, am I reading it correctly that we're still ahead by a certain amount? I'm not sure which amount it is, but
And I'm still doing that analysis, but the
Okay.
big one I kind of look at is the enrollment amount, right? But again, because our enrollment went up, our teachers have gone up as well. right?
yes, your
So
expenses.
that's kind of what I look at is that'll help us, but yeah. But there's so many ups and downs. Yeah, I know. I'm still analyzing how it affects us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And more challenges this year too, because they moved a lot of things around and called them something different and.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's, yeah, I'm glad you're doing it now. I never know which one it is.
Yeah.
The other one that I'll just mention, just because I'm involved with ops, but their fees are going up by 2% this year, just so that you know that.
Yeah, and I think there was an amount added to that grant. It's added in the board admin grant.
Right, so
Yeah, I think
it's
yeah.
covered off, but I don't know
I think
for
it
sure.
is.
And I don't think it's a huge amount for us, but it's still, it adds up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. I briefly went into, you had sent out with the draft budget, it says memos received, link is here, so I clicked on that and I was like, oh. When you go through, I didn't go through like everything, but just
Yeah.
right, there's some stuff that you had to go through, I'm sure you roll your eyes, right, to go, oh, it's just gonna take me forever just to read this and understand it, let alone input it into Excel and stuff, so yeah, my hat's off to you and your whole team, and thank you, it's a lot of work. And that's just for this month, right, so now it's
Yeah.
another month
Yeah, yeah.
for June and to have it all finalized.
Yeah.
So thank you and
Thanks.
sure.
And Tammy, that's why I'm glad that you're so young. So long before you ever think of even retiring.
It's not gonna get you extra money.
Not expecting any extra money.
Let's keep on working.
Thank you. Let's try to connect out of these.
Thank you, Tammy, as always, much appreciated all of you helping us wander through the maze, right? Because that's what it is. So thanks so much.
Thank you again. The next item we have on is the board retirement celebration and Jacqueline. Little lighter topic this time.
A little lighter, yeah. See, there is fun to be had in a
Welcome back, Jody.
I'm just gonna, I think, find the one. that
Sorry, I
lost.
was here for the previous few items. I just kept my video off, but I'm paying attention.
So I thought it might just be nice to just, please know this is draft. There is a typo I know that's in there. I can't edit it because Danielle has to go in and do it, but we know about it. But I just thought it might be helpful for you to see kind of what we've been working on. So around a theme of a sweet ending to a new beginning is what we're going to use this year. And so it's all about sweets. And this is what Danielle's put together as a mock-up so far for our program. I'll just scroll. This looks really nice. I really like that. Hope all of you do too, because I know it's pictures of you. Like if it was me, I might be like, oh, I don't know if I like these much, but I think it looks fantastic. And it is those really nice polished pictures we did. So it's awesome. And then there's going to be some remarks here from the chair and the director. And then this is the information about the night. So it is June 13th, and that is one of our meeting nights. So following the meeting is our tradition that we'll head over to Fellows High School for a 6:30 start for social hour and refreshments, and then we'll lay out the plan for the night. Those who've been involved before know that we tend to do a little slideshow and have some some comments made about each retiree, and we do provide them with a gift. And we are continuing with the same gift. It is the Richard Gill Schoolhouse, and it will have an engraved plaque on it. And we did change up a little bit what our one pager looks like this year. So Danielle's done this nice little mock-up that we think looks, I'm really happy with how it looks. And when she sent out to the schools, all of this part is filled out with an example of how they might fill it. So we're trying to look a little more for some consistency around what's being read and shared. And that's why it's not on this slide, but I do have one that went out. It gives a nice little blurb of somebody in their career and a little spot at the end for their favorite sweet treat. So a change this year is that we're doing this fully through the Human Resources Department, closer to the date, maybe with some help from our friends, seeing some other administrative assistant supports in other departments, but Danielle's organized everything so far and has everything ready to go. And we went through the list the other day and we're in good shape. So we're looking forward to it, and that's the plan to date.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, it looks good.
How many retirees do we have this year?
So we're around 40.
40.
Yeah.
Good number.
Not uncommon.
No, although I felt like you did, Pina, so I want to check the numbers thing, because I felt like every time I sat down, I was like, oh, someone else is regenerating. Like, it has felt like a lot this year, but maybe it's just,
Altogether.
yes, yes. Yeah, it's a pretty big number, so anyways, we'll keep you posted closer to the date, which is coming quickly, about a month from now. But we'll get all that tied up and you'll have some information closer, how many people are attending and all those things.
Thank you. It looks good. Any questions? Any other business? We have the keys, 4-3. Okay. Anything else? No, once, twice. Motion to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Susan, and seconder, Kim, thank you. All in favor?
Look at Amy.
Yeah.
Or pass?
Kim, I'm like,
Thank you, everybody.